Okay. One Piece chapter 1104. I'm gonna say it, man. I am very shocked at these turn of events, and I kind of like and I kind of hate at the same time the answer that Vegapunk gives us for how Kuma is operating. And I'm gonna start with why I dislike it. It's cliche. However, I will give Oda the benefit of the doubt here because if you go back and you look at everything associated with Kuma's character that we've learned so far, the one thing that we know for absolute certainty is that Kuma's love for his daughter, it runs deep. And it's one of those times where there are moments where cliches aren't necessarily a bad thing if they're done correctly. And sometimes the best thing to do with cliches is to basically stick to them. And that's what happened here. As a fan of Naruto, so if like you're familiar with the Naruto channel I run, Naruto Explained, you know that like one of the cliches that exists in that series is the whole thing about the body moving without thinking, basically moving to protect a comrade. We're getting something similar here. Only in this case, instead of it being a comrade, is protecting the last living family member that Kuma has. And it's a father protecting a daughter. And it just shows that there comes times where a parent can tap into incredible reservoirs of strength, even subconsciously, when they know that their child's in danger. It's the same reason why when a car accident happens and say a baby is trapped underneath the car, you have these stories of how the mother is able to lift the car even briefly up off of their child long enough for the child to get out. Now, afterwards, the parent is like in the hospital for like days on end trying to recover because you're tapping into 100% of the human strength. And so I like how what Oda did here is even though Kuma is tapping into his strength, and we see the flashbacks where just when he's getting ready to just deck Saturn, which that's a hell of a panel where he decks him, you get the flashbacks of Kuma and he's thinking about his parents, or rather, it might be Saturn thinking about his parents. And what I like about this is that you have Bonney crying as her father is getting ready to start laying the fist right onto Saturn's face. And you have this moment where Saturn's like, he should be dead. I flipped his self-destruct switch. He should not be able to do what he's doing. And even Vegapunk looks stunned. And when Vegapunk watches as Kuma just decks Saturn hard enough, he does this massive damage to him. This is one of those times where you know that Oda is teeing up a major reveal, and he does not disappoint here. So after Kuma just sends Saturn flying, crashing through buildings on some Dragon Ball Z shit, it's one of those times where for a moment, you think that, okay, Saturn's down. And maybe it's just me. I have a long time history of downplaying some of the upper tiers in the One Piece universe. But as the town's taking all this damage and everyone's saying like, oh my God, how did Kuma do this? He just punched out one of the 5 elders. These are the highest authorities of the world. We see the electricity kind of bolting from Kuma's head. It's one of those times where when you see it, you know that he has completely messed up, and yet it's completely worth it. And that's where we transition over and we see Vegapunk, and he's thinking to himself, I didn't attach a self-destruct switch to him because I knew if I did something like that, you basically make him into a suicide bomber, which that was the intention. Kuma at the end of the day was meant to be a tool used by the world government, as cruel as it is. And yet everything that he's gone through and everything that Vegapunk is narrating as you see Kuma holding his daughter protectively, he reveals he attached a shutdown switch onto Kuma and that it should have left him in a vegetative state and he should not be able to act of his own free will. And yet we see a father acting of his free will, protecting his daughter while his daughter is crying. They are reunited for the first time in forever. And Vegapunk comes to the conclusion that there are just some things that science can't explain. And I like this right here because, again, it's cliche, but it works. There's this whole belief of like people ask, is a soul real? And scientists will say, hey, a soul is not real because you can't see it. If you cut somebody open, you don't see a soul. And then you have other people who say there are just some things that can't be explained by science. And Oda showcases both of these things. He showcases it by having Vegapunk tell us, like, this should not happen. And I guess there are some things that science can't explain. And then he shows us this by having basically Kuma display that a parent's love runs as deep as it does. And as this is going on, you got Sentomaru, he's smiling, but then you got Kizaru, where Kizaru's like, okay, it's over. And you can tell in this moment, he's like made the decision, like, okay, like now's the time for me to make my move. And it's kind of nasty when you see where this is going, because you got Bonney, she's holding on to her father's head, or his chin rather, and she's saying, I saw all of your memories. I know everything that happened. Mom was a pretty cool person. I know that you were writing letters to me and etc. I know they called you a tyrant. I know that everyone feared you, but I'm never going to forget you. I know who you really are. I know that my daddy is the kindest person ever. And it's a nice moment because it's one of those times where you realize that there are different types of love, but when it comes to unconditional love, the only true unconditional love that you have is the love between a parent and a child. That parent is always going to love that child no matter what. That child, under most circumstances, if they've been treated with love, and I guess that doesn't make it conditional in that sense, but in an ideal world, a child will always love their parent. And that might be me projecting a bit, because I don't particularly care for my father. I don't love my father. I can't love somebody I don't know, but I do love my mother. And so it's one of those times where I kind of see it and I go, oh shit, Oda is really cooking here with the character work. And what I like about this moment is that Saturn begins to regenerate, and he basically plays spoiler here, and he's getting ready to try and break up this happy father-daughter reunion. And Sanji is somebody that sees this, and Sanji's like, oh, how's he regenerating? He's not going for it. And Saturn is questioning Vegapunk, saying, how did you do this? And if you go back to the last chapter, it's one of those times where like Vegapunk is saying like, look, I'll do what you want, but man, I don't agree with this. And Saturn's telling him in that flashback, like, look, like I will know if you do something that circumvents what I'm asking you to do, because I am a scientist too. And I find it funny that Saturn is not able to discern immediately what just happened, and his immediate instincts, they're just to go to the scientific method. And you have Vegapunk saying, I could call it the power of love if it makes you feel better. And you can tell it's something that Saturn does not want to truly consider. And even when he says it is a flaw in the human form, which that's kind of crazy that like love is considered to be a flaw, and yet when you look at it, Kuma had his personality basically stripped. Also, emotions of love would not be a factor into this. It just kind of shows how much of a monster we're dealing here with Saturn. Like we know it just based on the regeneration ability, based on the powers, based on the way that he's drawn, that we are dealing with a monster. But responses like this, it just further builds on the distaste that you have for him. Like he's quickly joined up that list with characters like Blackbeard, who I don't care for, and in a good way. Like I think Saturn is a good character in terms of how he's written, and the fact that I feel as strongly as I do for my distaste for Saturn's character, that lets me know that like Oda did a really good job because it's intentional. And so you have this moment where like Sanji basically jumps forward and he protects Bonney and Kuma. And given Sanji's extremely messed up back history with his family, in particular with his parents, is one of those times where you know why Sanji's the one that jumped forward. And what I like here is that the Straw Hats, they jump into action. And as the Straw Hats are getting into action, while some of them have basically seemingly moved Luffy's body because Luffy's body goes missing, it's one of those times where Franky jumps forward and he shoots off one of those beams, and he does damage to Saturn. And yet he takes his eye off of Kizaru, and Kizaru just immediately flatlines this dude, sends him flying. And that's where we have the moment where Atlas picks up Vegapunk, not Vegapunk, but she picks up Kuma, and she takes off running, seemingly to start taking Kuma to the laboratory so you can have Vegapunk operate on him and try and figure out what's going on. We see Kuma being carried off while you have Kizaru and you have Saturn standing side by side. And that's where we get the bombshell drop that the Buster Call has been activated. And we're going to see firsthand the destruction of an island. Like we saw it to an extent with what happened with Nico Robin's land, homeland, O'Hara. But it's one of those times where I feel like if Oda decides to live in the moment here, we've already kind of seen a genocide as it is. But if Oda shows everything going on with this Buster Call and we see like the true damage being done, we see Egghead being burned to the ground, he could be cooking here. This could go down as like an amazing arc. I thought after how Wano ended that this is just going to be a short arc, because you get like the long arc and then you get like a transition arc. But one thing that's really stood out with Egghead is that this has had a lot of meat to the bones to it, and this does not feel like it's a inconsequential arc. Like every arc in One Piece matters, but this one just feels different than any other arc we've had that comes after a major arc. This does not feel like a typical setup chapter or setup arc for One Piece. And when you had that speech at the bottom where Saturn's saying that those who study the secrets of the world, those who possess the blood of lost people, those who have awakened an ancient god, this island full of inconvenient people, they must be eradicated. The way in which he is drawn with the close-up of the eyes and the shading, and in particular the nose, like the way that the nostrils and everything are flared out, that's so good right there. That is like a menacing scene. That's one of those times where like whenever this gets animated, it might be animated because I know I'm way behind, but if this has been animated, I gotta see this scene here, because I guarantee you this is like the end of an episode here. This is where you end this off. And like, oh man, like that the end or to be continued thing that they have a One Piece's anime, that's got to be something that we see for a shot after this. Because like there are just certain moments you get to where it's a finite stopping point, and it's such a menacing shot where this has to be it. Like the way Saturn's drawn right here makes me want to punch him in the face, which again, that's a good thing. Anytime an author can make you hate a character and you've only really interacted with them for a short period of time. Like in the grand scheme of One Piece, we've not really been with a character like Saturn for a long time. And yet the time that we've had spent with them, I absolutely hate the character. I'm getting to the point now where when I see him, I cannot stand him. And that's going to be my chapter question for you guys. How would you rate what we're seeing with Saturn's character right now? Where does he rank in terms of I guess you could call him a villain here. Where does he rank for villains in One Piece? Let me know down in the comment section below. But as always, guys, like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Have an awesome day, guys.